He bought a pregnant woman sold by her mother. Then life gave him the miracle he'd been waiting for. Witness this unbelievable, true inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share where you're watching from. Let's get started! The sun had begun to sink behind the copper hills, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. Out in the middle of nowhere, where the land stretched wide and lonely, Samuel Carter lived a life quieter than the wind. He was a rancher known across the valley as a man of few words and hard hands. His life revolved around the land, the cattle, and the silence that filled his house since his wife. Mary had passed 3 winters ago. Every morning, he rose before dawn, worked the land until dusk, and went to bed with nothing but the sound of coyotes for company. The neighbors, miles away, would sometimes say, "Old Samuel's got everything but someone to talk to." And they weren't wrong. Loneliness had become as much a part of his ranch as the dust and the fences. But all that changed one bitter evening. The wind had turned sharp that day, carrying the smell of rain and distance. Samuel was returning from the small town of Ridgeway, where he'd gone to sell a few heads of cattle. As he rode past the railway station, a small commotion caught his eye, a woman arguing with a man near the back of a wagon. The man was shouting, his voice filled with greed and impatience. The woman, barely more than a girl, clutched her stomach and pleaded with him to stop. Samuel might have kept riding if not for that look in her eyes, pure fear mixed with despair. "Please," she was saying, "don't do this. I'll work, I'll do anything, just don't sell me like this." The man sneered. "You're lucky I'm even getting something for you. You're no use to me now. You made your choices and this is the price." Samuel's horse slowed on instinct. He had seen cruelty before, but something about this scene felt different, wrong in a way that gnawed at his chest. He dismounted, walked closer and asked, "What's going on here?" The man turned sharply. "Ain't none of your concern, mister. Family business." Samuel's eyes went to the woman. She looked about 20, her face pale beneath the dust, one hand resting protectively on the curve of her belly. "You selling her?" Samuel asked quietly. The man smirked. "She's my daughter. Got herself in trouble. I can't feed another mouth, let alone 2. She needs a roof, and I need the money. Fair deal." Samuel felt his stomach twist. "And you call that fair?" The man shrugged. "Fair enough for me. You want her, you pay. Otherwise, move along." For a long moment, Samuel said nothing. He looked at the girl, frightened, trembling, clutching her small satchel as though it held her entire world. Something deep inside him stirred, a memory of Mary's last breath, her whispered words before she died. "Don't close your heart. Sam, promise me that." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the money he had earned that day. It wasn't much, but enough to buy mercy. He handed it to the man. "Take it, but you're never to come near her again." The man grinned, grabbed the cash, and spat on the ground. "She's yours, cowboy. Good luck with that one." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Samuel standing in the dust with a frightened young woman staring at him as though she couldn't believe what had just happened. "Name's Samuel Carter," he said gently. "You're safe now. Come on, I'll get you something to eat." She hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. "My name's Clara. I don't know what to say." "Don't say nothing," he replied softly. "You don't owe me a thing." The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Clara barely spoke, her hands clasped around her belly as though she was afraid to let go. Samuel noticed how thin she was, how she flinched at sudden sounds, how exhaustion clung to her every breath. When they reached the ranch, he showed her to the spare room, once Mary's sewing room. Dust had gathered on the windowsill, but it was warm, with a small bed and a blanket that still carried the faint scent of lavender. "You can stay here as long as you need," Samuel said. "There's food in the kitchen. Rest easy, Miss Clara." For the first time that night, her lips curved into the smallest smile. "Thank you, Mr. Carter." Days turned into weeks. Clara began to settle into life on the ranch. She helped around the house, feeding the chickens, cooking meals, and tending to the small garden behind the barn. Samuel tried not to watch her too closely. but it was impossible not to notice the light she brought into the place. Her laughter, though rare, felt like sunlight breaking through years of storm clouds. Sometimes at supper, she would tell him about her past, the mother who had turned cold after her father's death, the man who had promised her love and left her with a child instead. Samuel listened quietly, never judging, never pitying, just listening. "You ever think God forgets some of us?" she asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel stirred his coffee slowly. "Maybe not forgets," he said. "Maybe just waits till we're ready for what he's got planned." Clara smiled faintly. "Then he sure makes us wait a long time." Samuel chuckled, but deep down, her words struck something in him. He had been waiting too, waiting for life to give him a reason to feel again. As winter approached, the days grew colder. Clara's belly had grown heavier, and though she hid her discomfort behind small smiles, Samuel could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. He knew childbirth could be dangerous out there. No doctor for miles, no midwife nearby. One evening, as the snow began to fall, Samuel returned from the barn to find Clara standing by the window, her hand pressed against the glass. "Everything all right?" he asked. She turned slowly, her face pale. "I think it's starting." Panic rose in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had delivered calves and colts, but a baby, that was a different kind of miracle. He helped her to bed, stoking the fire, heating water, remembering every word he'd ever heard about childbirth from Mary. Hours passed. The storm outside grew fierce, howling against the walls. Clara cried out in pain, gripping his hand until he thought his bones would break. He whispered encouragements, prayed under his breath, and tried not to let her see his fear. "Just breathe," he said softly. "You're stronger than you think." She looked at him through tears. "If I don't make it, promise me you'll take care of my baby." Samuel's throat tightened. "Don't you talk like that. You're gonna make it. Both of you." The night dragged on endlessly. Lightning flashed across the sky, thunder shaking the walls of the old ranch house. Sweat beaded on Clara's forehead as she fought through wave after wave of pain. Samuel did everything he could, held her hand, wiped her brow, whispered prayers he hadn't spoken in years. And then, silence. A silence so deep it made his heart stop. "Clara?" he whispered, fear choking his voice. She was still, her eyes closed, her face pale. For one terrible moment he thought he had lost her. But then, faintly, beautifully, a small cry broke through the storm. Samuel froze. The sound was thin, trembling, but alive. He looked down and saw the tiniest child he had ever seen, wrapped in a towel, gasping her first breaths of life. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and whispered, "Welcome to the world, little one." But before he could even hand the child to Clara, another thunderclap roared outside, and the window burst open, wind whipping through the room. The oil lamp flickered violently, then went out. The baby's cries grew louder as the storm swallowed the sound. Samuel rushed to cover them both, his mind racing. The roof creaked, rain pouring in through the cracks, and just then he heard the faint sound of hooves in the distance, fast, deliberate, heading straight toward the ranch. He froze. Out here, no one rode in a storm unless they had a reason. Was it a traveler or trouble? Clara stirred weakly, whispering, "Who's that?" Samuel reached for his rifle by the door, his heart pounding. "Stay with the baby. Don't move." He stepped out onto the porch, rain slicing across his face. In the distance, through flashes of lightning, he saw a shadowed rider approaching fast, a lone figure on horseback, cloaked and soaked, galloping straight toward him. Samuel raised his rifle, the storm roaring around him. The rider stopped a few feet away, dismounted slowly, and called out through the rain, "You've got something that belongs to me." And in that moment, Samuel realized the past Clara had been running from wasn't done with her yet. The wind screamed, the baby cried, and Samuel knew this night wasn't over. Rain lashed against the wooden porch as Samuel Carter stood frozen, rifle in hand, facing the shadowed figure who had just appeared through the storm. The words still echoed in his ears. "You've got something that belongs to me." The man stepped closer, and the light from the porch lantern caught his face. It was hard and sharp, like stone carved from bitterness. Water dripped from his hat brim, his boots heavy with mud. Samuel recognized him almost instantly, the man from the railway station. Clara's mother's man, the one who had sold her for money without a blink. Samuel tightened his grip on the rifle. "You got no business here." "Get off my land," the stranger smirked. "You think you can keep her? She's mine. She ran away and I've come to collect what's owed." Samuel's voice dropped low, dangerous. "You sold her. You made your choice." The man took a slow step forward, hand resting near the revolver on his belt. "That was business. This is about payback. She took something from me before she ran, money, jewelry. I don't care about her, but I'll have what's mine." Inside the cabin, Clara stirred weakly, clutching her newborn to her chest. She could hear muffled voices through the storm and the faint edge of danger in Samuel's tone. Fear crawled up her spine. She'd seen this man's cruelty before, the one who'd promised love, then sold her when life got inconvenient. Outside, Samuel's heart pounded like a drum. He had lost everything once before. He would not lose again. Not this woman, not that baby, not the fragile bit of hope that had just been born inside those walls. "I'll tell you once," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the storm. "Turn your horse around and ride away. Whatever you think you're owed, you won't find it here." The man laughed bitterly. "You think I'm scared of some lonely old rancher?" His hand twitched toward his gun, and instinct took over. Samuel fired first. The shot split through the rain, echoing across the valley. The man staggered back, clutching his arm where the bullet had grazed him. "You fool!" he hissed, stumbling toward his horse. "This ain't over!" He mounted clumsily, the storm swallowing him as he disappeared into the darkness. Samuel stood still for a moment, chest heaving, rain pouring down his face like sweat. He didn't know if the man would return, but he knew one thing for certain. He had made an enemy. When he went back inside, Clara was pale, frightened, the baby still crying softly in her arms. "Who was that?" she asked, though deep down she already knew. Samuel knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Someone who won't be coming back tonight. You and the little one are safe." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You didn't have to do that for me." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I reckon I wanted to." For the next few days, the storm raged on. Samuel kept a close watch on the horizon, always carrying his rifle wherever he went. Clara recovered slowly, her strength returning bit by bit. The baby, a tiny girl with dark eyes and a voice that could fill the whole house, became the heart of the home. Samuel built a cradle by hand out of oak wood, sanding it smooth until his fingers ached. He didn't say it aloud, but he had already made up his mind. They weren't going anywhere. They were his family now. One evening, after the sky finally cleared and the stars came out again, Samuel found Clara sitting by the fire, the baby asleep in her arms. The flickering light painted her face in gold and shadow. "She looks peaceful," he said softly. Clara smiled. "She's strong." "I think she gets that from you." Samuel chuckled, shaking his head. "No, she gets that from her mama." There was a long, quiet pause before Clara spoke again. "I never thanked you for everything. You saved us, Mr. Carter. I don't know how to ever repay that." He looked into the flames, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't owe me thanks. You brought life back into this place. I thought I was done with living, Clara. Then you showed up at my gate, and now—" He trailed off, his throat tightening. Clara reached over and touched his hand gently. "You gave me something I'd lost too, hope." From that night on, something wordless began to grow between them. It wasn't rushed or spoken aloud, but it filled the air like spring after a long winter. Samuel found himself smiling again, humming as he worked the fences, glancing toward the house more than he used to. And Clara, though still fragile in moments, began to laugh freely again, real laughter, the kind that makes the heart lighter. The months passed and the ranch began to change. Flowers returned to the garden. The animals seemed livelier. Even the air felt different, warmer, softer. Samuel taught Clara how to ride a horse properly, how to mend fences, how to plant corn just before the summer rains. She learned quickly, always determined, always grateful. The baby, whom Clara named Grace, became the center of everything. Samuel would often take her out onto the porch in the evenings, rocking her while the sun dipped behind the hills. "You got your mama's courage," he'd whisper. "And maybe, just maybe, you'll have your papa's stubborn heart too." Life, it seemed, was finally kind again, but fate has a way of testing peace, just when it feels safe to believe in it. One afternoon, while Samuel was out near the north pasture repairing a broken gate, he saw dust rising on the horizon. Riders. His stomach tightened. He reached for his rifle. There were two of them, and even from a distance he recognized the lead rider. The man from that stormy night had returned, this time with company. Samuel's pulse quickened. He ran back toward the house as fast as his legs could carry him. Clara was at the door when he arrived, sensing something was wrong. "They're coming," he said breathlessly. "Get inside, take Grace and stay low." She didn't ask questions. She trusted him. She gathered the baby and hid behind the old chest in the corner of the room. The two men rode up to the porch, dismounted, and strode toward the door with guns at their sides. The first one sneered. "Told you I'd be back, Carter. You shot me, and now I'm here to settle this proper." Samuel stood tall, rifle in hand, his voice steady as stone. "You step 1 foot inside this house, and you won't walk out." The man laughed cruelly. "You can't stop me. She's mine. That brat of hers, too. I'll take what I want and leave you in the dust." Samuel's eyes hardened. "Not today." The next few seconds passed like lightning. The man drew his gun, but Samuel was faster. 2 shots rang out almost at once. The stranger fell hard to the ground, his revolver skidding across the porch. The second man, terrified, dropped his weapon and fled into the distance. Smoke hung in the air. The echo of gunfire rolled off into the hills. Samuel stood there for a long moment, chest heaving, the smell of gunpowder sharp in his nose. He'd done what he had to do. Justice, or perhaps mercy, had finally been served. When he turned back inside, Clara was kneeling by the chest, holding Grace tightly, tears streaming down her face. She looked at him as though seeing him for the first time, not just as the man who had saved her, but as the man who would stand against the whole world to protect her. She rose slowly, walked to him and whispered, "It's over." He nodded. "It's over." For the first time in years, Samuel felt something break open inside him, relief, grief, and gratitude all at once. He set down his rifle, took Clara's hand, and pulled her close. Months later, spring returned to the valley. The ranch bloomed brighter than ever. Clara and Samuel worked side by side, planting seeds, mending barns, and raising little Grace together. Word of what had happened spread through the nearby towns. But most folks said the same thing. That's not just a ranch anymore. It's a home. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted everything in gold, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch, watching Grace take her first wobbly steps in the grass. Clara leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder. "Funny, isn't it?" she said softly. "How the worst day of my life led me here." Samuel smiled, the lines on his weathered face softening. "Sometimes life's got a way of bringing folks together through the hardest roads." She looked at him, eyes shining. "You think this was meant to be?" He nodded slowly. "I do. I think Mary sent you here. Maybe she knew I needed someone to remind me that life ain't done with me yet." Clara's hand slipped into his. "And you reminded me that not all men are cruel." The wind carried their laughter across the fields, blending with the soft hum of the earth. Samuel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. True peace. Grace giggled, falling into the grass, and Clara ran to scoop her up, spinning her in the fading light. Samuel watched them, heart swelling with a quiet joy that words couldn't touch. He realized then that miracles didn't always arrive as sudden flashes of light or answered prayers. Sometimes they came in the form of a frightened woman at your gate, A newborn's first cry, or a second chance at love when you thought your heart was long dead. As the stars began to appear one by one, Samuel whispered a silent prayer of thanks to Mary, to God, to life itself. He had waited a long time for his miracle. And now, sitting there with his family under a sky full of promise, he finally understood something simple but true. You don't find miracles. You make room for them. Final message. Even in the harshest times, kindness can rebuild what's been broken. Love, no matter how unexpected, has the power to turn pain into purpose and strangers into family.